Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Independent Podcast. I'm here with Stan Caplan. He is a congressional candidate this year for the 51st District. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And so if I would like to start off, and I usually always start off the interview with, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Your professional background and what led you to running for Congress in the 51st District.
Okay. I actually grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. I went through high school there. I went to the University of Alabama for a couple of years and finished in Austin, Texas at the University of Texas.
Right.
After graduation with a degree in accounting from their business college, I went to Houston, Texas and lived there for many years. And I went into the insurance business. After being in Houston for a number of years, circumstances brought me to San Diego. I opened my own little office in Mission Valley.
Nice.
And I have helped people with their employee benefit needs, their life insurance planning, and talking about the things that are important to them.
Sure.
I've met and spoken with people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all income stratas. And so I think I have a pretty good feel for the wants and needs of individuals. And the reason that's important today is that when I go out and I talk to people on the street, they feel like that they've been neglected by their representatives in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And which we can get into a little later is the reason for that.
Right. Awesome. Now, growing up, did you always see yourself running for being involved in politics? Was that something that were your parents involved in it? What kind of was there a seed planted in you a long time ago that got you to this point?
No, not at all. In fact, the majority of my life, I thought politics was boring, and I really had no interest.
Yeah.
As your viewers can tell, I'm only 29 years old. No, I've been around quite a while, and enjoyed my personal success in my small business, and I really have an affinity to those that start and want to grow their own business today. But to further answer your question, no, I had no interest in politics until, believe it or not, a year ago, January. Now, that's only a year and 5 months ago did I get into politics.
Okay.
And the reason is that I became very disenchanted with the direction the country was headed. And I felt like that there needed to be some change before the whole social structure of our country changed for the worse.
Okay. Got it.
At that point, I started investigating. I went down to the local Republican Party, and I did that because in this particular District 51, there was a first-term incumbent Democrat by the name of Sarah Jacobs, very young. She was 33 at the time, and her policies were very far left. And not only did she endorse and support everything that the Biden administration was coming out with, but even went beyond that in terms that made no sense to me. So in going down to the Republican Party and asking, are you guys going to put someone up to run against her? They had no answer. So I met the career politicians, I met elected officials, and the answer that I continually got was that there's no way that I could win.
Right.
And what I have found out since, and I've learned a lot in my year and 5 months, was that, politicians, like to play it safe, particularly if they've been in a while and they have a sense that they don't have much of a chance to win. They won't stick their neck out, even if the times call for it. And I feel like the times did call for it. So the bottom line was, I said, I can't believe in the United States of America, you're going to have a one-term, very far left Democrat go unopposed in a congressional election. I said, I didn't make all A's at school, but civics taught me that, every person should have a right to vote for a candidate that, best meets their qualifications. And I just couldn't let this happen.
Yeah.
So being the novice that I was, had no background in politics,
Mhm.
I said, I'm jumping in,
Yeah.
which I did.
Awesome. I think that's the difference between a leader and a politician. Politicians kind of just go with the flow. They love to just look up to leadership and take commands, but leader sees where the puck is going, and they take the initiative and they take the risk.
Right.
And unfortunately, I feel like we lack leadership in this country, and I'm glad that you saw that and you went about doing something about it. We need more of that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And let me just fast forward and give you a little bit of what else I learned along the way. When I inquired as to why they wouldn't run, or why they couldn't win, or why I was, quote, stupid for running,
Right.
okay, they said, well, here's two reasons. Number one, there is a Democrat registration advantage, which is rather large.
Mhm.
I mean, the district has 42% Democrat, 25% Republican, and 25% independent.
Mhm.
And they said, and the number two reason was, oh, she has lots of money, which
Mhm.
is true. I
Right.
mean, she's from the Qualcomm family.
Right.
She was, born under good circumstances.
Yeah.
And she spent $7 million to get elected of her own money.
Yeah.
And that is a factor today. And it's very unfortunate,
Right.
because that was the question that was continually posed to me by potential donors, volunteers, anybody that had anything to do with politics, is
Mhm.
how much money can you raise?
Right.
And to be honest with you, that was very disappointing, because it became clear to me that the people that were in there were basically buying their seats
Mhm.
and were not in there for the right reason.
Yeah. Now, I have a similar. I ran against Sarah Jacobs in the 53rd district
Okay.
back in 2020. So I'm familiar, and I also ran as an independent congressional candidate. So I know exactly how much money, and how hard that is, and that unfortunately, yeah, people feel that way. People. It's weird. People want change. They don't like the fact that seats can be bought. They don't like the establishment. But there's a lot of people who don't want to do anything about it.
Right.
But at the same time, there is a growing number. I mean, I think the fastest growing party is technically the non-preference party, which is independents. They're the fastest growing, especially here in California, because of their disenchantment with either the Republicans or the Democrats. And so I think that, I do think that there's a lot of people in the middle that are looking for alternatives. And so I think the fact that you're ahead of the curve is in your favor. Obviously, there's very few people can match Sarah's, treasure chest.
Right.
So there's all their alternatives and ideas. The way to beat her, in my opinion, is probably ideas and getting those ideas out there. What actually brought you to the point of saying, I'm going to run as an independent? Why did you make that choice?
Okay. So again, I got in January of 2022
Mhm.
as a registered Republican. In the primary, which was to take place June the 7th,
Mhm.
I worked real hard. I worked every day. I had no name ID, zero,
Yeah.
and hardly any money. And I did make, my calls. I did go to events. I did meet people. And in the primary, I got a little over 37% of the vote.
Wow.
And I said to myself, wow, if I can get 37%, starting from scratch
Yeah.
with no name ID or money, I can win this thing. See, I didn't know any better at the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad.
Right.
I worked my tail off
Mhm.
from the primary, June 7th,
Mhm.
to the general election, November 8th, literally 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll ask people, well, why did you lose? Well, I did everything I could, they say. I said,
Yeah.
well, did you, leave your day job?
Yeah.
Did you leave your personal time?
Yeah.
Well, I did.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do it because I was begging donors for money.
Mhm.
And I had a team of maybe 25 really devoted volunteers that were giving me everything.
That's good.
And I never wanted to feel guilty if I lost.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that they were all real good to me and they understood. So here's what happened between June the 7th and November the 8th.
Okay.
After the votes were counted, I picked up one more percentage point. That was very difficult for me.
Okay.
I would have been just as well off going into the basement,
Right.
And not begging for money
Yeah.
and not working my volunteer so hard
Right.
and not spending every day for 5 months doing what I did
Yeah.
to win. And I analyzed the precinct voting data after the fact, and it showed me in the more liberal and more highly Democrat areas, precincts, that the vote tallies were unusually high. Example, in District 51, 54% of registered voters voted, 54%.
Okay.
In these heavily Democrat precincts, which some of them had 10 to 1 Democrat registration, the votes were coming in at 70, 75, up to 81%. And I said, this doesn't seem right in a midterm. And the bottom line is, and it's true, the Democrats have an infrastructure in place where they know how to get the ballots in, and that makes the difference. So what was really strange, halfway through my campaign, I called the Republican Party and I said, please give me the name of someone that can help with ballot harvesting. And they did not have a name. They were totally lost. And what I was not told by anyone was what a large factor that was, because they seem oblivious to it. And if they want to be competitive, they need to start catching on to the fact that in California, they'll send millions of ballots out. Okay. They don't know where they're going to or who's getting them. It's legal to take someone's ballot in for them, but it's not legal to fill it out or to buy it from them or go to trash can and pick stacks out.
Right.
I don't have, videos of this,
Right.
but I will tell you it's unusual for 81% of the people to vote in those districts.
Okay. So just to kind of be clear, so you're saying 81% of the registered Democrats voted.
No.
Okay.
In these precincts.
Okay.
There's 1,000 precincts in the district.
Okay.
I'm just telling you that somehow these large numbers of ballots in the heavily Democrat precincts made it in. So if again, 54% average, but up to 81% is just not likely.
Not likely. Okay.
So if I could fast forward,
Sure.
I stepped up when no one else would for the Republican Party. I got 89,000 votes in the general election.
Yeah.
And the way I look at it, the positive thing was that even though I was devastated that I got my tail kicked,
Right.
is that 89,000 people had a vote.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have voted.
Right.
And so I felt good about that. Fast forward to January of this year, just 4 months ago, okay? I get a call from Bill Wells, who's the mayor of El Cajon, and he says, I'm thinking about running. And I said, let's talk. So in February of this year, we sat down and I said, you did the right thing. I said, you're the only person I've heard from. I said, I haven't heard from the local party.
Yeah.
I said, I stepped up when no one else would. And he said, well, I thought it'd be the right thing to do. And I said, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Unbeknownst to me, I found out that he had already been approached by the Republican Party and picked to be their endorsed candidate. Now, this is not proper protocol.
Right.
Normally, they'll let the two Republicans or three or whoever fight it out in a primary, and the winner, of course, they'll endorse and support. I have heard of rare circumstances where just prior to a primary, they'll let the two candidates come before the Central Committee and, give their presentation, and then the Central Committee will pick one. But I was very upset, and I called the chairwoman of the local party after I found this out. And she says, well, Stan, we think he can raise more money than you. I said, how disloyal.
Right.
I said, after all I went through for not only the voters, but for our party,
Right.
because I'm sure I helped some down ballot races.
Mhm.
I'm sure I got exposure out there that helped the party in general.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that that was being treated very fairly.
Yeah.
Based on that, I said, I'm out of here. I'm running again
Yeah.
because it's the same stand, but different party.
Right.
I said, I'll run as an independent.
Yeah. That's good. That's awesome. Yeah. My disillusion with the parties is that I find that they are more concerned about maintaining power than maintaining democracy and really representing the people.
Right.
You know, they're like you brought up, they're looking at the money. They're representing their donors.
Exactly.
You know, so that you know, I commend anybody who takes that initiative as an independent. Because we need more of that, especially qualified independents. You know, because there are some independent candidates out there that are a little bit on the fringes, but to have, you know, but there are some really good independent candidates that have some common sense. You know,
well, what I found, and I've been going to parades, street fairs, you know, festivals,
Mhm.
and I've approached, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Yeah.
And I've said to them, I said, you know, here's what I stand for. And all I ask is that, you know, you be open
Mhm.
to the person and the platform and not the party. And
Yeah.
I will tell you 90% said absolutely
Yeah.
that regardless of whether it was an independent, because people are sick of politics.
Right.
They're sick of political parties and they don't feel like they are being represented.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on things like, for example, you know, ranked choice voting? Are you somebody who's in favor of something like that to kind of help even out the playing field and help independents? Have you ever looked into something like that by any chance?
I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know, I have not studied that thoroughly.
Okay.
So I don't feel like it'd be fair to give an opinion right
Sure.
now since I'm not totally informed.
Yeah. Well, I always, and that's a question I like to ask most candidates or people in politics. I would say I would recommend looking into that. I think it's a great way for independents or even candidates who are part of a party to get more of a fair shake. Or you know the centered Democrat or the centered Republican gives them an opportunity to get a chance. So
Sure.
I'd recommend that. Now, one of your big points that you're talking about is an income tax relief.
Right.
Can you delve into that? What that means?
Sure. What I've decided, again, from talking with people on the street and them feeling underrepresented, it's all parties. It's
Mhm.
whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or independents. It
Right.
doesn't matter. And so there's a common denominator there. And with inflation the way it is today,
Mhm.
it's very difficult, particularly in San Diego,
Yeah.
for a lot of families to pay their bills.
Mhm.
I would think the majority are paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And people need relief today. And I think people should hold on to their money instead of giving it to the government.
Mhm.
So my first bill that I want to introduce on day one in Congress is called the Personal Income Tax Relief Act.
Okay.
And what that simply states is that the first 50,000 of earned income will not be subject to any federal income tax. In addition, there's cost of living adjustments. So if the next year the cost of living goes up 6%,
Yeah.
then it would be no federal tax on the first $53,000 of earned income.
Oh wow.
And that can be a significant savings
Mhm.
for someone that's earning 50,000 or less,
Right.
particularly if he has, you know, no deductions. I mean,
Mhm.
it can be up to $4,000 more for him to pay for it, you know, his
Yeah.
needs,
Right.
his bills.
Mhm.
So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. I like that idea. I feel like all of I feel like the middle class gets left out. And you know, there's a lot of programs to either help the rich or the poor, and when the majority are in between, and unfortunately, it's a big part of why a lot of people are leaving California in
Right.
general.
Exactly.
And so I'm all for anything to help the middle class, that person that ain't rich enough to take advantage of some of the tax breaks that some wealthy people get, but they're not in the low income bracket to where they get a lot of help from the government. They're fending for themselves, and especially here in California, it's expensive.
Yes.
So I agree. I think anything to help lessen the burden, and we have control over their tax burden, so we can do that. I mean, I think that's a great idea. You also have something about college accountability. I saw.
Yes.
Explain that as well.
Well, the Biden administration is coming out that they feel like they should eliminate or cancel student loans, which is, I believe, over $1 trillion right now. This to me is so unfair. I mean, what about the people that worked and paid their college loans?
Right.
What about the people that never went to college?
Yeah.
I mean, that work a trade. I mean, why in the world should they pay for those that made a commitment and then broke it?
Right.
And so what I'm saying is, sure, if I can't blame people for wanting to go to college and, better their education and get, a career accordingly. But I said, that's not where the fault is, not with the hardworking American citizen, the taxpayer.
Right.
Let's put some blame on the universities.
Right.
So I'm saying to the universities, and what my bill will state is that if you take tens of thousands of dollars of tuition, you have a responsibility to not only educate your students, but when they graduate, place them in a relevant job according to their major that you supposedly educated them in.
Right.
And I'm telling them that if you don't provide the resources and the help necessary to put them in an appropriate occupation, you're going to start refunding your tuition. You have 90 days to help them get a job. And after that point, if you're not helping them and they do not get a job, 10% of the tuition they've paid monthly will start being refunded to that student.
Wow.
That'll be an incentive for them to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And universities have lots of money today, and they can certainly do a outplacement department, because let's just take a person that gets a degree in sociology. And let's say there are 1,000 majors in sociology at any given time at the university, but there's only 500 positions available.
Right.
Well, maybe they should start balancing and say the department's full, or find a way to get them jobs that would be similar to what their degree dictated in order to help them, because these students, these kids need some guidance too.
Right. Yeah. One of my things is with student loan debt that I don't like about it is the fact that you can kind of, from a lending perspective, lend as much as you want almost to a young person, and they can never get from under that debt. Do you have any thoughts about my opinion would be, treat college debt as we treat all other debt, credit card debt, personal loan debt, car debt, meaning allowing people to claim bankruptcy on those student loans. It would have a negative effect on their credit report, and there would be a consequence to it, to doing that. But at the end of the day, because to me, if somebody can run up $50,000 of credit card debt and claim bankruptcy, should we, in essence, be able to allow all debt to do that, whether it's student loan? I don't know if you ever thought of it from that perspective, but that would be something that I think would allow, the students or graduates from getting out from under their debt, but also having the consequence, facing consequences to doing that. Just as if you ran up a credit card debt, you could get out from under it, but you face the consequences of that.
Yeah, I would not like to encourage more bankruptcies.
Right.
I think probably tuitions are too high. With my particular act that we just discussed, it would be an incentive for them to get in better jobs quicker and be able to pay the debt down a little bit faster.
Right.
I think a lot of these folks are not getting, jobs that provide enough income based on their major and their degree to start paying it down. So that's one solution. I think the universities have, I just think that maybe they need to give the students a little bit more of an education as to what the impact, both short and long term, is going to be on them, and how difficult it's going to be to pay off.
Right.
The problem is tuitions are too high.
Right. Yeah.
So there has to be some work on that. And if it calls for legislation that, starts reducing some of the federal monies or something to get this more in balance, because the rate of increase in tuition has certainly been higher than the average cost of living increases.
Absolutely. And you also have something on your website in regards to immigration.
Yes.
What are your thoughts and ideas in regards to immigration?
Well, I'm not timid about this one. I guess, we do have a lot of first generation immigrants in the United States that came in legally, but everybody that's here can go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 generations, and there were immigrants. My grandparents came over from Europe in a boat with a suitcase, around 1900. All right. Nobody gave them a cell phone and gave them an airplane ticket and gave them a place to live for free and gave. Okay. People that came were just ecstatic about being at a land of opportunity and freedom. And they relished that, and they worked for that, and they became good citizens. And I will tell you that I'm not happy with what's going on with the immigration situation today. I have heard that there are already, 3 million that illegal immigrants that have come in the last couple of years. I don't know how many it is, but that's how many they know of. How many got away? How many are criminals? How many are drug pushers? How many are, taking little 12-year-old girls and prostituting them out? We don't even know where they are. Yet we still continue to fund this kind of behavior. And I will tell you that resources are stretched thin enough. Healthcare. If you have millions of illegal immigrants that are not denied access to healthcare, that puts you in line sometime behind them in getting your treatments. What about the educational system? What about housing? There's just, the system's about to break, and it's not fair to Americans, citizens, and taxpayers. So the bottom line of all this is legal immigration only, like we did for 250 years. And it built a strong, vibrant economic country, and which became the leading power in the world. It's not fair to hardworking Americans that pay taxes for them to be second-class citizens. It's not fair.
Yeah, I would agree. And I 100% agree that, somebody here who came illegally should be put in front of American citizens. But let me ask you this: when you say that there's money being paid, or obviously the Border Patrol, that part I get, where we spend money on that part. But outside of that, what are the costs that we're incurring that we didn't incur with other people's that we're incurring now that are causing the burden?
I will be honest. I don't have all the figures at hand. Okay. It's my understanding that, they have access to healthcare, which is free. It's my understanding that they're in the educational system. And I hate to say they're nasty people.
Right.
I mean, I don't blame them for coming.
Right.
I blame the government for letting them in. I mean, if I were starving and they were going to say, hey, come here and you can get free healthcare, free education, probably a free place to live, and you can be, on a plane, any place in the country you want. I mean, sure, I'd be breaking the gates down too.
Yeah. I always try to, one of the things on the immigration issue, I try to, and I, like I said, I'm all for legal immigration and getting a better process going. I always want to make sure people kind of, is the cost, because technically, if you're not here legally, there are no free services that you actually can get. There's no welfare. You don't qualify unless. Now, are there maybe ways that you can maybe take over somebody's ID or something like that? Yes, but obviously American citizens do that as well. But technically, unless it's through a charity, if you're not either a green card holder, or a citizen, you're not entitled to any kind of welfare. But I do understand the educational system. If their kids are here going to school, they will take up space. That part I do understand. I do. My issue with the immigration part, where I feel we get it, some parts of the country get it wrong, is that, and where you kind of tapped into it, where, hey, look, they're doing, in my opinion, they're doing just what the Pilgrims did. The Pilgrims came for a better life. They're coming for a better life. And obviously, we had open borders for many years in the beginning of our country. You come here, you make it to this country, you work. We're not going to give you anything. That's the part that I agree with. But you're going to have to pull your weight. And as long as you're here, you can make it happen. Obviously, once wasn't until they started making laws against the Chinese coming for the railroad that then we started having these stricter immigration laws. I mean, the Mexican border was wide open for over 100 years. And it was fine. It worked fine. And, but because we do have these programs, I do understand that things like law enforcement and education, we do need to be smarter about that. But where I was getting at is, I feel like as part of the country, we don't understand our immigration roots all the time, that these people are human. But yes, we do need a better system. Our taxpayer dollars should not be going to non-citizens. That's where I would agree with you on that. And I do think that us as a country, like, I always love John F. Kennedy's speech where, he basically says, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And obviously I think as people who come here as immigrants, they should abide by that. And even as Americans, unfortunately, we're not abiding to that as much. We're always asking, there seems to be more asking as opposed to what can I do? But I share that with you simply because I think that the immigration part of it, the mother who takes their children and walks them, thousands of miles, is doing it not even for free healthcare. They're just doing it for a better life. The same reason people got on boats and came here and traveled that, and many of them died coming this way. But that's all. I wanted to kind of give my spiel on that, if you don't mind. You had an accountability for politicians, an issue about that. What is your accountability where you wanted to hold politicians accountable? Was there a bill that you wanted to bring up on that?
Sure. I've got another bill too.
Sure.
I've already written 5 bills.
Okay.
I would venture to say that there's probably not someone in Congress that's written 5 bills to this point. My opponent, Sarah Jacobs, has authored 1 bill that's been passed, and it's to rename a post office. So that's about how effective they are in Washington. I want to take exception to your argument before we move on to this. If the word is open to the world, come here. $1 billion, $2 billion, how many billions? And at what point is the country broken? Now, I will tell you this: if I were the president of a Latin American country, Honduras, El Salvador, any of Nicaragua, and I saw this going on, I would empty my jail so fast. I would take every person that is unemployed and unskilled, and I'd ship them up here. And don't think for a minute that the cartels are not taking advantage of this. Over 100,000 people a year die from fentanyl. Okay, that's coming in through those borders. Okay, there's gangs, there's criminals. I'm saying overall, it's good to know who's coming into your country, make them come in legally, vet them. Okay, and I will tell you right now, I'll go one step further. There are illegal felons in our prisons in the United States. They should not be here. Yeah. Why should we pay for them and feed them? Okay, that's another taxpayer expense. Deport them immediately. If we find people that are pushing drugs, killing people with fentanyl, and they're get them out of here right now. So I understand. Again, I can empathize, and I would do the same thing if I were from Latin America and I said, "Come on, we're going to go." It's wide open. we can have a better life. They're going to let us in, maybe give us free stuff. Sure. But how many billions?
Mhm.
And so at some point you break the country. Anyway, I just had to
Yeah.
give
And
you
no, and
my view.
I appreciate that. And I think, for me, this podcast is about sharing ideas.
Right.
And I always try to, I always want to make sure that the guest has, I want you to feel like you can say whatever you want here.
Sure.
At the same time, and when I feel a little strongly, and because I feel here's where I'm trying to get at, with the legal immigrants, the thing that gets thrown around a lot is the criminal part. Obviously, are there criminals that come? Obviously, but that was the same when the Europeans came over as colonists. There was just as many people who raped, pillaged, took, stole land, killed people than anywhere else. Now, and just like the English sent a bunch of people to Australia, they sent all their criminals. I get that, to colonize Australia. Yes, we do need a better system because Cuba did the same thing. They sent a bunch of their criminals over. Would other Latin American countries do that? Probably. But even if they did that, overwhelmingly 95% of the people who come over are not going to be here as criminals. That to me is the part where I go, okay, I understand there are always going to be a criminal element in any group of population. I mean, when the Italians came, the Irish came, they had their mafias. When the Jews came, the Russians came, all of them have criminal backgrounds that are still ingrained in our society to this day. But for some reason, it's like we don't talk about, I just feel like that story gets left out. I'm somebody that likes to explain the whole story, the whole American picture. Yes, we're dealing with something now, which is, yes, we should know who's coming in. The people who do come in have to understand that you're leaving your country. You're coming to a better place. There's a price for that. What are you going to do for us should be the question. But to say that where I kind of have a different approach is they're no different than the people who came 200, 300 years ago. It's just we have a different, we're in a different situation. We have to handle it with maybe different tools. But to me, it's just the same group of people.
Okay, one last comment, and then
Go ahead.
We've beaten this horse.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you say 5% may be bad.
Right.
Okay, so 3 million, 5 million, that's 250,000 people. If one of those 250,000 criminals raped or murdered your wife, you would think differently. All right, so what's the next subject?
Right. well, and here's the thing. But also, I'd have to also say, because that is, when people throw that out, my issue with that is, well, what if anybody came and raped and killed your wife? Even if they're a U.S. citizen, if I go back and say, well,
okay,
that, you know what I mean? It's that back and forth, and I get it, and we can play that.
All right, so, let's just go to the next thing.
All right, what is your issue with the? I saw something about keeping politicians accountable.
And so I'm the same on enforcing the law, whether it's for illegals or politicians.
Sure.
If they break the law, I want strict penalties. And I want maximum penalties, because no matter what they're doing, if they betray their constituents' trust, if they violate the Constitution or criminal law, I want them to be prosecuted. And it's the same with any deterrent. That's why the government is getting more and more corrupt, because they're not accountable and they don't pay a price if they break the law. This has to be changed immediately.
So when you're saying they don't, I'm trying to put an idea in my head. Like, so when you say they don't, they're not accountable. Could you give an example?
Insider trading.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect.
There's one example right there.
Awesome.
Okay. Their relationships where they make money with forming alliances with corporations or lobbyists or whatever, and they put those needs let's say it's a Pfizer pharmaceutical company, and maybe Pfizer's not acting in the best interest of the constituents.
Mhm.
There's just a number of places where they should put their voters first ahead of any relationships or monetary gain.
Absolutely. Now, would you go as far as saying, would you think that there's campaign finance laws that could help fix that and prevent that?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm not familiar with every campaign finance law, but there needs to be in place where the amount of money is limited into campaigns.
Mhm.
I mean, in some elections today, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. This
Yeah.
is outrageous.
Right.
It's just stupid.
Right.
And so that has to be changed. The relationships of once you're in Washington in Congress, can you go to one of your corporate people that you kind of funneled, legislation their way, like a defense contractor?
Mhm.
Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to go to work for them right away.
Right.
Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to take money from, these particular donors.
Mhm.
There needs to be things in place where you're really serving the people and you're not there for monetary gain.
Right.
And it always comes down to the money. So yes, a lot needs to be done to clean this up, but they won't do it once they get up there.
Right.
And so that brings us to term limits. It's a total necessity that there be turnover and that these people don't go to work for the folks that they befriended and economically helped when they
Right.
were in service.
Are you familiar with Citizens United?
Yeah, I mean, not totally. I
Okay.
mean, go ahead.
Well, I guess the question is, if there was a vote on Congress, would you vote to overturn Citizens United, which basically, in essence, says that corporations have that they can donate, in essence, as much as they want, and under the guise that it's free speech, so they can donate as much money to candidates because if we prohibit them from donating, we're prohibiting their free speech.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Right. That's yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
of course they should be limited or,
Right.
or even prohibited.
Mhm.
I mean, why should corporations, they say this Mark Zuckerberg spent $400 million in the last election
Yeah.
to put up voting boxes or machine. I mean,
Yeah.
this is outrageous.
Right.
This is election interference.
Yeah. That's one of my biggest things is money in politics, because it doesn't, and you're going against somebody who, I mean, the advantage for her is she's at least using her own family's money. But I mean, if it's so hard when corporations can basically go, okay, we know it, $7 million, we can buy a congressional seat. It's like they set the price.
Right.
And so, a couple of donors can come in and say, hey, we support this person. And kind of almost knowingly, they're going to win the election.
Well, it really doesn't make a difference whether it's her money or not. Quite
Right.
frankly, they
Yeah.
need to limit it.
Yeah. And I agree.
And give a regular person, a guy that, has a vocation,
Mhm.
or a mom who stays home with her kids.
Yeah.
Let them run for office.
Right. Yeah. I think that's one of the difference. The founders really wanted just normal folk
Of course.
to just run the country because they're the ones who have to deal with the legislation. And in terms of term limits, what in your mind, do you have a term limit in mind? Like, is it 3 terms? Is it 4 terms?
3 terms for House, 2 terms for Senate.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect. And were there some other? I think there was some on law enforcement. I saw. What would be your take on that?
Yeah. I have also drafted a bill that's called a Comprehensive Immigration Act.
Mhm.
And I did that with the input from a 22-year Border Patrol veteran.
Mhm.
And I really want your viewers to know the following. People in Congress can argue back and forth as to why there's an immigration problem, or why, there's not a smooth system, or why they don't fix the system, or
Mhm.
it just blah, blah, blah. The conclusion is from the Border Patrol,
Mhm.
the laws are on the books. If you enforce the laws, the problem will take care of itself. Okay. I
Right.
want to repeat that.
Mhm.
The laws are on the books. So my act, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act, says that immediately laws will be enforced.
Okay.
It gives code sections. It gives penalties for not enforcing it. It says the people that don't, like this Mayorkas, that's the DHS secretary,
Mhm.
if he didn't, he'd be prosecuted. These people are violating constitutional law.
Yeah.
And we're back to punishing, corrupt politicians.
Yeah.
So the rules are there. So I needed to bring that up. I also have a new one that supports the police.
Mhm.
That police should be fully funded and allowed to do their job, and that prosecutors that do not prosecute should be fired, and that more emphasis should be placed on the victims
Mhm.
and not the police.
Right.
Now, I don't want police overreach by
Right.
any means, but I am tired of certain media tearing them down, making everything their fault, when in fact it's a difficult job that they have,
Mhm.
and they have issues, and they're regular folks,
Right.
and it's nice to have some support,
Right.
and they're leaving in droves.
Right. Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is by start letting the public know that it is a noble profession,
Mhm.
and that they deserve to be, compensated based on the work that they do,
Right.
and have more support
Right.
for them.
Yeah, I think on one of the things that I hate here in California is that we have that law where if you still, and I don't know the exact amount, but I think it's under $950, it's a misdemeanor.
Right.
And in essence, you can steal every day. You can live off, if you can live off $100 a day, you can just steal all day. And I actually just the other day, Fashion Valley, saw a guy grab a bunch of clothes and just walk on out like it was nothing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. I also was in Oakland visiting my son, my older son, my adult son. And as I was pumping gas, somebody came, and I didn't see this. It was the person behind me in the other part pumping gas. Guy came out with a ski mask, because I was gassing up right before going to the airport. That's where everybody gasses up. With the ski mask, looked in my car window as I was looking the other way, and looking to steal if I had anything in there. I didn't have anything because I was just there for one day.
Right.
And when I told the gas attendant there, they said, "Oh yeah, that happens all day."
Sure.
I told the person that when I turned the rent-a-car, they said, "Yep, that's common practice." I mean, they can, they're and the people that were the car that came up and did that, it was a nice Mercedes, all black tinted windows. And as I was leaving, they were come to do it again.
Sure.
I mean, I hate the culture of we're emboldening people to commit crime. We're encouraging them. Same thing with kind of homelessness. I feel like we are, I forget the term, but we're allowing them to have this kind of behavior.
Yeah. Well, you're hitting a common thread
Right.
here. Whether it's petty theft, and I have to tell you, $950 a day doesn't seem so petty to me.
Right.
Whether it's immigration,
Mhm.
whether it's politicians, whatever it is, if you don't have deterrence, it's going to continue.
Right. Yeah. So hopefully we can make those changes. Were there any other issues that maybe I didn't touch on that you would like to kind of talk about?
Well, yeah, there's lots,
Right.
but one that seems to be very important to San Diegans is homelessness. I think I'm different than all the other politicians you're hearing from. So let me just tell you the way I see it. And your viewers can decide whether they like what I have to say or not.
Right.
But, I feel very strongly, and that's why I'm running. I don't believe it's compassionate for people to live on the street. You always hear compassion. I don't believe it's compassionate to the people that the people on the street are harassing.
Right.
That they're, urinating or defecating on their storefronts. If they harass little girls going to school, it's not compassionate to them either. So what I would do is pick these people up. And again, I'm saying these people, most of them have drug addictions or mental illness. A lot of them don't know that they need help. And a lot of them don't care if they live on the street.
Right.
but that's not considerate and compassionate to the rest of us.
Mhm.
So I would have professional treatment centers. Professional treatment centers. What they would do, we would pick people up off the streets and encampments,
Mhm.
because they don't need to be there either on public streets. I was downtown San Diego last week. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
I absolutely couldn't believe it. Tents all over the sidewalks in downtown San Diego.
Mhm.
You know, if I'm coming from another place that keeps a clean city, I'm thinking, what planet am I on?
Right.
So I would pick up these folks. I'd have them properly diagnosed,
Mhm.
and that's important. What type of mental illness? What kind of
Yeah.
drug addiction? Then I would give them the specific treatment for that diagnosis. Okay. Now, while they were undergoing rehabilitation, I would have on-site job training.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be anything, you know, I'm not training them to be doctors,
Right.
but just something where they can perhaps be self-sufficient again.
Right.
Here's the catch. The medical professionals determine when they're released. These people don't say, I'm better today, and
Mhm.
go do drugs and then go back to the street.
Mhm.
When they're prepared for society, okay, then let the medical professionals determine it's time for them to have a chance. So that's where I'm different than
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah. No, and I agree. The term I was looking for was enablement. We have a policy of enabling people
Mhm.
to be homeless. I like the idea. My wife's a social worker, so she works with kids, but she sees a lot of these homeless people, and a lot of foster kids do go into the become homeless. But the problem, and I'm probably more in line with you on this one, where a lot of people want to be compassionate. Obviously, that's not compassionate to let them be on the street. A lot of people say we're criminalizing it, but unfortunately, you in essence have to criminalize it to be able to say you can't do that. You have to go here. If we don't criminalize it and it doesn't mean they're criminals per se. It just means that we have to have the authority to do that, to say, hey, you can't be here on the side of the street. You have to go here once you, and I like the idea of saying, hey, you don't get out until somebody says you're good for society,
Right.
Whatever that might be. And obviously somebody might come, like any kind of, they may break the rules and have to come back again. We don't know that, but at the end of the day, what we do know is that what we're currently doing isn't working.
Exactly.
I think we can all agree on that part.
Of course.
Yeah. So, perfect. Stan, if you don't mind, how can, if people learn more, what's your website? How can people help you and learn more about you?
Well, I want all the viewers to know that I'm also known as Caplan America.
Yeah.
Okay, Caplan America. And they can go to my website two ways, either caplanamerica.com or caplanforcongress.com, CAPLANFORCONGRESS.com. It's loaded with information. It goes into the depth and the bills that I've written. It talks about my entire platform. And I think that, one can get very well informed as to who I am and why I'm running and why it's very important. And more importantly, how I'm different than other people that call themselves politicians. So I am running as an independent in Congressional District 51. The primary is not till next March, but that'll be here before you know it.
Mm-hmm.
And the general year from November. And I'm soliciting, volunteers, people that have a couple bucks, anybody that wants to help out, feel free to contact me. And appreciate your having me today.
Yeah. Well, Stan, I just want to say thank you for coming on. I wish you the best. I'm glad you're running as an independent, and hopefully, for all you listeners out there, feel free to go to his website and check out his issues. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. And Stan, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I wish you the best. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks. Thank you again, and till next time. Bye bye.